Let me tell you a fun fact. Within the last 2 centuries, more than 90% of the world's millionaires have been created by investing in real estate. But if done incorrectly, without the right knowledge, required skills, or partners, it can also create a ton of problems and a lot of sleepless nights. You feel like sometimes there are way too many gurus out there trying to sell you on a weekend course, or just too much noise to cut right to the facts? Yup, we did too, and this is why we started this podcast. Our goal is to provide real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and enthusiasts with all of the most recent knowledge, secrets, tips, tricks, and tactics so that you can grow your own portfolios, increase your returns, net worth, and most importantly, create generational wealth for you and your loved ones. Remember, this is your real estate career. Information is your sword and shield, so eat hearty, prepare for battle, and grind your way to victory. My name is Tejas Gosai. I'm joined by my partner, Jeremy Moyer, and we welcome you to the Real Estate Investor MBA podcast. All right, Jeremy, Real Estate Investor MBA partners, we just had Whitney Sewell on, the king of real estate podcasts. He does a daily show. I think he's done over 1,000.
I think he's close to 1,300 at this point. Yeah.
It's 1,300 days of him interviewing. He is amazing. He has such great, his organization, Lifebridge Capital, and he has a foundation, right?
Yeah, he does. We talk about it a little bit. It's tremendous. You guys definitely got to check it out. I think a lot of his passion and his drive, it is fueled there. So it's great to hear that and listen to a little bit of his story. Some stuff I didn't know, even though I listened to quite a bit of his podcast episodes. So it's definitely one to check out.
Yeah, he is. He's an executioner. He just executes. He puts it together. But he's politely aggressive. He really is, and he's very committed to his why. And you'll hear some of that stuff. So check it out.
Yeah, hope you guys enjoy it.
All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is a big day today for Real Estate Investor MBA. We have the king of real estate podcasts, Whitney Sewell. Jeremy, big deal for us.
Absolutely. No, we're really excited to jump into the conversation.
We've had so many programs, so many guests, and the goal is to educate everybody as much as we can. Because of you guys, big thank you. We're all over the internet, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. And today's a good program. Whitney has done so much, and there's such a big spectrum with our guests. We'll have some fun, Jeremy.
Absolutely. So as Tejas mentioned, we have Whitney Sewell with us today. Whitney, how you doing?
I am excellent. Thanks for having me.
Well, perfect. Yeah. So if anybody hasn't heard of Whitney before, so Whitney is a seasoned real estate investor, podcast host, philanthropist. He's also the CEO and founder of Lifebridge Capital. It's a multifamily syndication investment firm with 1,000 doors and $300 million in assets under management. Whitney has been able to scale his business at a groundbreaking pace, starting from nothing in 2017 to now consistently raising over $10 million in just a few hours. His daily podcast, The Real Estate Syndication Show, has featured over 1,200 experts in the field. Whitney also recently founded his new nonprofit, the Lifebridge Foundation. The latest exciting development in his commitment to donate 50% of his profits to support orphans and their adoptive families. Whitney and his wife have 3 children by adoption and love spending their free time together in the great outdoors at their home in the country. Whitney, thanks again for your time today.
My pleasure. Appreciate the intro.
Absolutely. So Tejas and we're really excited for this conversation. But before we kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of what we want to get into today, can you tell us who the real Whitney Sewell is and how you started to get invested in real estate?
We could take that a few different directions right there, but I know we'll stick to the real estate. So I'll go back to March of 2001. I think it's important for people to know this part of my journey. I think it's helped me a lot later on as an entrepreneur. But I say March of 2001 because that's when I joined the military. I just thought it was the right thing to do. I My grandfather was a World War II veteran. Actually, he's 101 and still making it, still
Wow.
alive, still living at home with my grandmother who's 94. Amazing. Anyway, a
God
little bit of
bless.
military in my background, but at that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do after high school. I just really thought, okay, I'd love to serve. I think it's going to serve me well. I'm going to learn a lot. I had no idea. Obviously, our country was going to be attacked 6 months later, and I would find myself spending a year in Iraq, toting around a machine gun. Praying every day I get to go home. Unfortunately, not everyone in my squad made it home. And so just many learning lessons, in that year period of being in combat in Iraq. And then, but I say the military taught me to have a never give up mentality. And I mean, it's just not an option to give up when you're in combat, right? I mean, people's lives are depending on you to perform, for you, your training to kick in, and you to make it happen, right? It's just not an option to stop. And so, that's just been crucial in my path, I think, moving forward. And I didn't see at the time how that would play out later on. I came home and I had no clue what I was going to do still. But I thought, policing seems like a great transition. And I applied Kentucky State Police, applied numerous agencies, but out of 1,200 applicants with Kentucky State Police, I was thankful to have one of 5 positions that they had available, and I was very blessed. I loved working the road as a police officer. I loved being a first responder, and I enjoyed that a lot. Not to mention getting to drive fast, of course, that's a lot of fun, right? However, very dangerous position, but I soon figured out. I mean, I would have done it for free the first couple of years, but I got married, and my wife and I just passed each other in the hallway the first whole year of marriage. And then I finally realized too, about 2 years in, that there's guys retiring that's been on 25 and 30 years, still barely making 40,000 a year, 35. And I was okay, this maybe this is just not what is best, or I got to figure out some way for us to make some more money. We wanted my wife to be able to stay at home when we had children, and it was going to be difficult, on that income, and plus just a worse schedule, right? That you can imagine. And so I started researching, well, what are some ways I can supplement my income? Well, don't you know, real estate, was one of the first things that popped up. I mean, 90% of millionaires have been made in some type of real estate, right? And so I thought, okay, if that many people can do it, I can do something to supplement my income. And I did. So we bought 2 triplexes, made a ton of mistakes. This was like 2009, even still overpaid. I didn't, I knew nothing. But somehow we made that happen. And we were remodeling a house. We were living in it at the same time. We
Nice.
were managing these apartments. It was quite chaos for a new marriage. However, I then became a federal agent, moved to Virginia, started. I'll speed the story up a little bit because I want you to be able to ask plenty of questions. But ultimately,
Love the story though. Please don't.
yeah, well, I wanted to stay in real estate. I knew wealth could be created there, but I had no idea what could be done in this business at this time. I still, just really had blinders on and thought, what, I'm going to maybe find a few more single family homes or a couple duplexes, those things. And then finally one day I was like, you know what, like that's going to take a long time to build the income that I would like to have. And so I started thinking about larger multifamily, but still like maybe an 8-plex or 6-plex or something like that. I partnered on a 15 unit with a friend. And even then I was like, I can't believe we have a 15 unit property, like this is
It's a big
crazy,
deal.
that we could do something this big. And so, however, I started training horses professionally. It's a passion of mine since I was a little boy.
Wow.
And that started taking a lot of time, right? I was federal agent during the day. I was training horses every afternoon until midnight most
Intense.
nights. And I still had the 15 unit and whatnot, but I say that there was a time my wife and I were on the beach. We were just walking, and I call it thinking time now. I didn't know what to call it then, but really it was a time at that time to be separated from all the chaos, right? And just for us to have some downtime to pray, to think, and really to think about, oh, is what we're doing right now going to get us where we want to go 3 to 5 years from now? Are we going to keep doing this? And it was obvious at that point, I think, to my wife and I both, that, what, like, we just can't keep this up. I was missing all the time with my boys, our kids at the time, and my wife. And it was like, okay, it's just not worth it. Right. So we had the farm we'd always dreamed of, the house, and And really, and just to give you some context, I built a brand around that business. I was doing clinics in a lot of different states and all over the country, and selling horses for more money than I ever imagined. So I built this business to where, like, I'd always dreamed of, right?
Mhm.
Since I was a little boy, but it was never going to be passive. It was always going to require me to be there. And so finally, we were like, you know what? We know real estate can build wealth. If we're going to do this, we have to make some hard decisions. So we came home. This was like September. And between Christmas and New Year's of that year, we were moving out of our farm. We had sold our house, sold the farm, sold everything related to the horse training business, and we're committed to commercial real estate. And we say, you know what, that's what's going to do it for us. We know we can build wealth in that business, but it required some hard decisions. We didn't have any wealth, personally or in our family. Wasn't raised around that. So sold the farm. And then soon after, hired a mentor, started the daily podcast that you referenced. We've interviewed 12 or 1,300 people now. It's every day. And but that podcast then pushed me to do things I never imagined. I had to build teams. I had to scale. It pushed my network to expand in ways I never imagined. It got me on stages that I never imagined being on. I never believed that I could be any kind of speaker. Right. And then I've had more opportunities to speak than I could have ever imagined as well. You did mention our mission, and I would highlight that's a big thing behind who we are, right? That's a big thing behind when times were tough the first few years. That's what would keep us going. I would share that mission with our kids, or my wife, who she couldn't care less about real estate, couldn't care less. But man, she cared. She's 110% in behind our mission, right? And helping these families adopt children. And so I would say that's a crucial part, that's behind just the first hard years, right? Of just having to hustle, and keep it going, and being able to paint that vision for our family. And then, there were days I would do 12 to 15 interviews a day, because I had 2 days off a month from my federal agent position, and my team I had to build a team to keep this going, because I've never edited the first piece of audio or video. And they knew, hey, you better have 12 to 15 interviews scheduled, these 2 days a month to keep the show going. And my wife would call it my marathon day. She would literally pack me lunch to go to the basement. And so it was chaos, for a couple of years.
You know what? There might be some people who don't know that you have a daily podcast and you've done that many, but Whitney is the guy. Every day you go on LinkedIn, you listen, you go to every single social media. I've had the opportunity to be on the program, but it is relentless, Whitney. Like, from me to you, you are the god to be able to do that. Back to you.
Well, no, I appreciate that. And it was not easy. I tell, people hear that, and I try to stress, hey, I didn't really realize what I was probably getting into in the very, very beginning, but you know what? And I probably didn't realize the work or the load it was going to put on my family, right, and my spouse. And so, but we made it. The Lord sustained us. We are, we're on the other side of that now. But yeah, now, we have 320 million roughly, in assets under management now, 1,300 plus doors. The Lord's really blessed our business and our nonprofit. And I think we partnered with 10 families last year with large grants to help them adopt children. And we hope to do, 20 or 30 this year. And so it's exciting stuff.
The best story. Tremendous from us. Thank you for your service. I didn't know a lot of that, so I didn't think I could think you were cooler. Now I do. But yeah, Jeremy, I think you got a couple technical questions to jump
Yeah,
in.
before we get into technical questions, Whitney, if anybody wants to learn more about your foundation, can they go somewhere to check that out?
Yes, you can go to the Lifebridge Foundation. .com. That's going to be the best way right now. However, I will put out that we're rebranding that as we speak. And so one of the fastest way to stay on top of that would be to go to the about page of Lifebridge Capital. You're going to see it at the bottom, exactly where to find that. But that website is live. We're serving families there, and people are donating often as well through that website.
That's tremendous. No, thanks for sharing that. That's so awesome that you guys are doing that. So getting into, like Tay just said, some technical questions. So, in the bio, you referenced that starting from nothing in real estate. You probably had some smaller units. Now that we just listened to some of how you got started, but to really getting into your current business today, I'm guessing that started in 2017 to today, having 300 million in assets under management, ability to raise millions, tens of millions in a few hours. That's no small feat, right? So I think I'd like to stay here on this topic for the majority of our conversation today. So Two questions came when I read that by this morning, like preparing for the podcast today. Came to my mind. So one, how did you do it? And can this achievement be replicated? By following a checklist, a process. Like what's that look like? I know that's probably a very long conversation, but just at least some of
Some,
the high points.
some
Yeah.
secret sauce.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll share some things with you that I feel have helped me. And honestly, I didn't see some of this happening in the beginning. I didn't know that it was going to work the way it did, but you can replicate this, and it's not a secret. But it is. There are parts of it that just oftentimes people aren't willing to do, right? And some of that means just more hustle or more grit or whatever and everybody's heard that, but it is true, right? I mean, it's I am no genius, but I am willing to work as hard as I can, to make it happen and to not quit, and so it's crucial. But I'll give you a piece in that I think is missing often. And people hear about this know, like, and trust triangle, right? We hear that, if you want to raise a lot of money, know, like, and trust. Everybody stresses this. But I'm going to skip that portion because I know most of us have heard those things, and they are crucially important. If an investor's going to invest with you, you have to get in front of them, right? They have to know you. Eventually they have to like you, and you have to build that level of trust. But I say there's something missing from that, and it's loyalty. And I try to help people to think about not being so transaction focused, but being loyalty focused. Okay, and I want to help you. I want to help you think through that a little bit. And one way is you have to show up to give. And when and I say you show up to give, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really even matter the situation. Like, it is a mindset shift, like showing up to give versus showing up to take, right?
Mhm.
And we've heard that as well, but it's so true. And I know, and when I started doing this, I didn't know about Simon Sinek, the book Start With Why. I would highly recommend it, but that's ultimately what I was doing. And I'll give you an example. So I go, when I started networking, or when we sold the farm, and we moved into a smaller house. And so we could start the real estate business. We were starting our third adoption process as well. I left out that story for some time, but we do have 3 children through adoption, and that's what prompted, obviously, the foundation and the hardships of funding an adoption. 40 to 60 grand per adoption, unfortunately, in 150 million orphans in the world. It's a shame, right? But what happens, at those conferences, when I started just networking, I was traveling all over the country, going to as many conferences as possible. When I would go up to somebody, think about this. If you have 5 minutes at a conference with someone, sometimes less, right? Or maybe at a meetup, what are they going to remember about you?
Mhm.
Like, what are they literally going to remember about you? And if
Right.
you are talking about your next deal, if you're talking about maybe, the local market, or you're talking whatever, most likely they've just talked to 20 other people that are talking about very similar things, right? So
Right.
are they going to remember you? And if you're talking about those same things, most likely not. And so, like I said, I didn't plan this, but this is the way it worked out. And I started seeing it happen. Well, then obviously I started to lean on that more. Um, but when I say show up to give, thinking about that person, you want to add as much value as possible, right? But immediately I want to catch their attention. So, everybody says, well, you shake hands and say, well, what do you do? Right. And so I'd say, I'm Whitney. My wife and I operate a nonprofit that helps families adopt children. We help fund their adoptions with a large grant, but we do that through our commercial real estate investment business in multifamily. And so our investors love knowing that they're making a great return while helping us fund children's adoptions as well. And then just be silent.
I remember you. Yeah.
Yeah. So just be silent, right? And so, because immediately it takes a second for them to process that, because it's different than what they just heard 20 other times, right?
Mhm.
And then immediately the questions you get are very different, or that I get, right? Well, wait a minute. Tell me about that again. How does adoption connect, or what do you do? What about this nonprofit? Well, then we get to talking about adoption and children and orphans and our children personally, and then we get to talking about their children, right? People love talking about their children, right, or grandchildren. But what happens is they see something that I'm very passionate about, right? And there's an immediate connection that happens that's very different than if I was just to talk about business, right? And we can talk about business next week, right? When I follow up with them. But right now you want to work, you want to focus on building that connection. You want to focus on them seeing you as different than everybody else they just talked to. Okay. And like I said, I didn't plan it that way, but I started seeing it happen where I'd follow up a week or 2 weeks later and people were like, yeah, I remember, I know who you are, and it was because of that conversation. They remember about the adoption stuff. They remember about our desire to give back or to help these families or our children or and obviously I'm trying to remember about their kids, so when I follow up I can reference that. But that is crucially important, and so that why component, right? And I'm happy to go into that a little more as far as how that helps in much bigger ways.
Yeah, well, here we go into that. I mean, Simon Sinek's the best, and I think his whole movement definitely changed some of my world, and then also a lot of the folks we have on the podcast. It is like habits. What do you do? I think most of our, well, a lot of our listeners are still trying to get into real estate, right? Like they're just
Yeah,
on the periphery. We say in every episode, like jump, do it, like shoot first, ask questions later.
yeah.
But do it right. Go ahead.
Right. So building loyalty, right? It's not an easy thing, but when you're consistent over time, you'll build loyalty. With investors, with others, and when you can build loyalty, you can go to levels like you just much faster and where you haven't imagined going because people will wait to invest with us because of the way we give back or because of their loyalty to our mission, right? And they want, and ultimately there's a desire in there, and this is a great, I mean, it should be obvious because of that, but there's a desire in us to want to do something bigger than just something monetary, like a monetary goal, right? But that also applies, it applies to more than just your investors, and so that applies to my wife, right? That applies to my kids. That applies to our team members. People are working for us right now that are like class A talent, and they came to us because of our mission, right? We posted a job, and they're like, "Man, I'd love to work for you all. I can see that you're about more than just a new house or some monetary figure, right?" And so they want that culture, right? They want to be a part of that, and they want to see themselves playing a role in fulfilling that, right? And they see a bigger mission, right? And so that helps them to drive forward in a big way. It helps my wife to drive forward, as I referenced earlier. When times are really tough, or I'm gone for weeks at a time, traveling to conferences and working and doing the podcast and doing deals, during all that madness, right? But it also helps our investors to want to partner with us, right? And I see that time and time and time again now, where there is a connection because of that just doesn't typically happen if you're just talking about investor returns, or from a specific deal. I mean, believe it or not, returns that are projected returns, I'll say, are so common in our industry, right? Certain 7 or 8% for a return, 70-30 split. I mean, 15-70% IRR. I mean, you see it on most people's deals. Well, how do you stand out, right, amongst all the noise, right, all the deals that are coming at your investors? Well, there has to be something. And like I said, I didn't plan it that way, but that's what I started seeing happening. I'll give you 2 quick examples of companies who have loyalty, and one is Apple. Right? I mean, everybody knows what that logo means. Everybody, even the word, it's just one word. It doesn't even say electronics or Apple, amazing electronics, or like it's just Apple, and everybody knows what that means, right? And people will wait outside in blizzards for days to get that first iPhone. It just amazes me. You could go a week later and just walk in the store and get it, right?
Right.
But they do. Or Harley Davidson. People tattoo Harley Davidson on their back or on their arm. I mean, you talk about loyalty, right? And when somebody tattoos Lifebridge Capital on their arm, I'm going to be impressed, right? I don't even want them to do that, but I'm just, like, that's loyalty, right? I mean, they are probably going to own a Harley Davidson the rest of their life, and they want all their friends to know about it, right? I mean, that is loyalty to that brand, and that's what you want to create. But you need to be about something bigger than just that return or just a monetary goal.
No, it's tremendous. No, I think you hit the nail right on the head there, Whitney. When you were talking just the last minute, I was thinking of the Seth Godin book, Tribes, that talks a lot about the same stuff. I think you're absolutely right on the ball. That kind of leads me into my next question. You mentioned bringing in talent, and for people to help expand your business and to fulfill certain roles and whatnot. I mean, how important it is to surround yourself with others who have that common goal to build a business together. How important was that to you to grow at the rate that you grew? And then, I talking with, I think, solopreneurs, or maybe they're in a joint venture, or they, three people want to start a business together, and they're looking at growing, but they don't have income coming in yet. What advice could you give them? Like, maybe they really need to get a virtual assistant, or maybe they need to hire someone locally to help them, not these tasks that really don't provide the biggest ROI for their work, that they can go somewhere else to put that effort in. What advice would you give them to kind of take that next step? Um, yeah, yeah.
Before you answer systems, I've always wondered, like, how do you run a podcast like that? Like, how did you build that system? It's, just being on the podcast and seeing how meticulous everything rolls out, and it's like 2-3 a.m. You're like, how does Whitney perform this magic? So piggybacking that.
And I'll back up a little bit because to that point, because I think there's a interesting story that would be helpful. So even around the podcast, like obviously that was very early on in my syndication, business, right? And I share now too. You know what? I started the daily real estate syndication show, and I'd never done a syndication at the time. And so I just hope that like blows that myth out of the water for people that you need to be an expert in something before you do a podcast or whatever, right? And it's just not true. It is just not true. But you become the expert, right? Or an expert. You almost have no choice, right? Believe it or not, when you're interviewing people, you get to ask any question you want, right? And so if we have a problem in our business and I'm interviewing 8 or 10 people today, well, that's probably going to come up during a few of the interviews, right? I'm probably going to ask some of these experts, well, how did you do this? I mean, it's just, I'm going to bring it up somehow, right? And so you get that opportunity. But I say that podcast, if I had done a weekly show, which I was pushed by numerous people to not do a daily show, even 2 people specifically that everybody listening would probably know. I was at a conference with 2 different conferences. Both these people said, Whitney, you're crazy. Why would you do that? And my mentor was like, that's why you have to do it. That's why you have to do it, because, it's just too much work for most people. So I'm like, okay, I'll figure this out. But if I had done a weekly show, I would have tried to have done all the audio editing, all the video editing, all the show notes, the posting. I would have tried to have saved that money as much as I possibly can. Right. And I probably it would have been half done, not near the quality that it was. And then I would have also probably gotten frustrated or quit. Right. Just not being able to keep up. And so by committing, and I call it overcommitting, I talk about it often. So by overcommitting, I knew that wasn't an option. I knew that I could not do those things. It was not an option for me there's no way I could keep up. I could barely keep up just doing the recordings, but I had to build systems to automate every bit of that as much as possible. But I immediately found 4 virtual assistants from all over the world who had those skill sets, audio editing, video editing, show notes, somebody helped me manage and post the website, those things. And that was crucial. Could not have done it without them. Right. But I had to build that team. So I had to learn about hiring people. I had to learn about managing people, and then just keeping that going. Like I said, that was crucial to the success of the podcast and keeping, just the daily madness at that time rolling. Right. But it just pushed me to automate as much as possible, where I don't think I would have if I'd done a weekly show. I mean, I hired somebody to just find guests, right? That's almost all this virtual assistant did. In the beginning, I think we had to send out like 300 emails to get 30 people signed up. I mean, now people want to be on the show. It's very different. But in the beginning, I mean, it's a ton of work, right? To find that many guests. It's still a lot of work to find enough guests. But I wanted to go on to your other question. What was your other question?
No, it was maybe it's like the limited, or the limited mindset of, I know I need people, but I don't have extra money coming in, or money's not coming into the business yet. Like, how do you overcome that?
Yeah. So for me, early on, it was virtual assistants. I mean, I use things like Upwork. I use onlinejobs.ph, where I have I think 10 full-time people in the Philippines right now. They produce our show. We're producing a number of other people's shows as well now. So that's hiring those people have been crucial. My main person in the Philippines started, and she was a teacher. She's skilled. I mean, she can speak better English than I can. And I'm serious, and very skilled. And she was making $3 an hour, as a teacher. I started her at $6. And then, like within a few months, she's making 8, 9. So you imagine like tripling somebody's income. That's life changing, right? And so I love being able to like see that happen in these people, right? And helping them in a big way, but they're very loyal. And that helped me to grow very quickly, is finding people, blessing them with a great income for them, right? And them just becoming very loyal and using their skill sets to help us in a big way. I would encourage people to think about you hiring a virtual assistant and knowing that they don't have to be full time. It could be 2 hours a week, right? If that's what you can afford right now. But I would say, what are the highest and best use? I can't really speak. Highest and best use, things, items, of your time. Like, where's the highest paying items? We've all heard that. But have you written down really the things that you do throughout the day? Have you really thought about the things that somebody else could do? Because I bet there's so many tasks that you do throughout the day that somebody else could do. And until you really think about writing them down, and you may not actually write them down, but I would encourage you to. And so you really have to think about it. And then you're going to look at that list and, wait a minute, somebody else could do that. I could build a process around that. And people say, well, wait a minute, I don't want to have to train somebody. And then a month later they leave. And then well, guess what? That's going to happen. That is going to happen. You're going to have to train more people, but you're going to get better. You're going to have better processes because of it. You're going to be better at hiring people. You're going to even be better at managing people because that first one didn't work out, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to learn a lot. And now, I have an amazing assistant right now, but I didn't start with her. She's paid very well. I think. And she expresses that she thinks so too, but I didn't start out with her, right? I started out with somebody that was like 2 hours a week, and probably within a month, she or less, I needed more time, right? Mm-hmm. And she gave me like 4 hours a week, and that's all she could do. Well, eventually I went to somebody that could give me 12 to 15 hours a week. Within a few months, guess what? She didn't have enough time, so I went to somebody full time. But it's a process, right? Mm-hmm. Even now, guess what? She filters all my email. I don't know how many hundreds of emails I get every day, and she filters them, right? She knows who on the team certain emails should go to. She knows which ones she can respond to. But we have a whole system where there's like 4 or 5 different tags she gives them, so I know which ones I need to respond to. Right. And so, when I hired her, I had like 800 emails just in mine, important and unread, not counting everything else. And within a month, she had that down to like 30. And then we maintain 20 to 30, I think, that I need to see, on a daily basis. So, so think about those things. You don't need to see every email, right? And you shouldn't have to be scheduling all your appointments, for the most part, or whatever. Like, there's so many emails, there's so many things that take your time. That's just not the highest and best use. You got to figure out what that is, and you got to find somebody to start replacing you for those tasks. And that's what I did. But the podcast pushed me into doing that probably faster than I would have otherwise.
That's the best. That's honestly what I've been waiting to hear, looking forward to this interview. How many VAs? How do you pull it off? I've been wondering for months. We're getting close to time, but Whitney, you've done so much, and the timeline here is not that long. It's long, it's arduous, but this is 10, 15 years, and you're young, and you have a very momentous growth here. What's the future? What are you looking at? How are these things affecting your business with COVID, whatnot, raising money, putting it to work is difficult. Can you get into that?
Yes. So, we launched a large fund like last August, September-ish timeframe. It was closed last year. And so, like you mentioned, those funds, we had to make sure that we were ready to place those. We don't want $20 million sitting in the bank for 6 months, right? Yeah. That is not an option. But we had 2 deals under contract before we ever launched the fund. Right. And then we had pretty good deal flow. So we felt really good about launching a fund. And we do have all that. We still have 2 more deals to close over the next about 30 days. And that will, they'll be the last deals in that fund, and all that capital will be placed. But, you mentioned like knowing that we can place it, right? In COVID and all those things. COVID did nothing but help our properties. Nice. It really only boosted our properties in a massive way. I think that's very market specific, typically, right? Depending on how COVID affected you. But in our markets, Boise, Idaho, Colorado Springs, for the most part, other markets in Colorado, people have just been moving there, in droves. And so it's been incredible. And so you mentioned, the 320 million has really been in the last, 2.5, 3 years, right? Mm-hmm. For the most part. And so we have moved very fast. Our first project together, it was my business partner and I was 20 million. And then for the most part, everyone since then have been around 30 million or so, with the exception of one that was a little smaller. And so that is not normal. I realize that, that is not normal and not typical. My first project, I raised 250,000, and the next one was a $500,000. I think I partnered with somebody else on the first couple projects, and then it's like it doubled numerous times, after that. And so you can do the math. But now, yes, I'm very thankful for a loyal base of investors where we send out a deal and it will fill up very fast, right? Very fast. But it's because of that loyalty component, and then it's eventually track record, right? And them seeing you perform, just that monthly distribution hitting hitting their account every month. But I could not do it without the team. I couldn't do it without the Filipino team either. As you mentioned, just all the things that have to happen.
So Whitney, how are you guys looking at? I mean, Tejas just kind of just mentioned this in his question, but how are you looking at with the risk of potential raising interest rates on the impact of the market? Are you factoring that in on your due diligence, and just how do you kind of see that playing out in the commercial real estate?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And I meant to say on the last question, yes, we do. We had planned to be at a $500,000,000 by the end of 2023 in assets under management. I think we'll do that this year or before the end of the year, and then I see us getting into other asset classes. I see us having other opportunities for investors, even outside of real estate, just with some of the connections we've been able to build. And so I'm pretty excited about, just seeing where Lifebridge Capital is at, even just 2 to 3 years from now, because I think we'll be doing other things, as well, in other industries even. And so, but as far as interest rates, some of that, yes, I do expect interest rates to go up sometime soon. I don't know. Nobody knows exactly, right? Nobody has that crystal ball. I ask every guest nearly as well, about what do they predict? What do you expect? And we have to plan for it. I think we have to plan for it. What's going to happen? And I think an important part of that is being in communication with your lender, right, or lenders. Hopefully, you have many lenders that are you're pretty close with on the business front, right, and you're communicating with. We had a project recently that went through underwriting, and we had the interest rate locked in that we were very tickled with, and we wanted somebody that wanted to 1031 even, and we wanted to make it happen, but that would mean it had to go back through underwriting. Right. And so the interest rate was going to raise quite a bit if we did that. We're like, I'm sorry, we just can't. Right. And so it has raised a little bit, even from what we have seen. And we are accounting for that, in our underwriting as we are assessing deals. But I think, too, it is so much, as far as interest rates specifically, is that connection with your lender. Man, I mean, and also we're doing mostly agency debt, of course, but we do have a local credit union that we've used on numerous projects now, who have been so faithful to us, even on very large deals, and have helped us in a massive way to get great rates when we couldn't do it through agency.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
Jeremy, you got last question?
Yeah, I love asking this question at the end. So I call it the next steps advice. So in a scenario, let's say our listener is an investor, maybe they have a few larger multifamily properties, but they haven't been able to streamline that capital raising. I know we touched base upon a few of the things that you do to help yourself out, Whitney. But what is one piece of advice that you could provide them as like the next step that's actionable today? Like they listen to this episode and they're like, yes, this is exactly what I need to do. But what's that one piece of advice that you would, leave the listener with that they could actually do today?
To help them to raise more money.
Yes.
Ultimately. Yeah. Yes. I would say, one is difficult, but I would say,
we'll take a few. Yeah.
If I had to pick one, and there'll be maybe a couple other things to follow, but I would say thought leadership platform of some kind, right? Whether it's it doesn't have to be a podcast. People say, "Oh, I'm scared to death talking to a microphone." I would say get over it. I was too, right? I mean, I never imagined speaking into a mic, as much as I do now. But you gotta position yourself in the front of the room. That does not mean you have to be the expert, right? People start meetups all the time, and they've never done a deal before. But pretty soon they become very knowledgeable because they're having to educate themselves. They're finding people to educate their group, right? Just like you do on a podcast. So you need to have some type of thought leadership platform, and you need to be consistent. And you have to be very, I mean, obviously we were daily, even if it's weekly and be every week, know exactly what your niche is, your niche audience. I think you, or one of you may have mentioned this earlier, but it's like you don't focus on just reaching everyone, right? You try to reach everyone, you reach no one. Think about who your audience is. And man, if you can get 1,000 followers, I mean, you're going to do amazing, right? You're going to do amazing. So you got to get past some of those limiting beliefs as far as speaking, being in front of a room, but you need to have some type of thought leadership platform. I mean, mine has led me to be in front of thousands of people at conferences and speaking, and that I just never imagined. So that's probably one of the biggest things that pushed me just to do things that were many things that were way outside my comfort zone. And that's what you need to happen, right? You have to be pushed outside your comfort zone.
I feel like it's like the Jim Carrey movie Yes Man. Remember
I'm
that?
not familiar with that one.
Oh, it's so good. He it's one of these slapstick movies, but he has to say yes to everything anyone asks him. And, then he's a very timid person, and then he really discovers like an entire world, you know. Anyway, I hope a listener out there gets a chuckle out of that. But we got to wrap it up. Whitney, you're the best. We really appreciate you. We hope to have you on in the future. Down below, you can check out lifebridgecapital.com, and lot of wonderful things, new deals coming out. If you want to join Whitney's investment pack, obviously everything's on the website, and we super appreciate the time.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Honored to be here. Love to come back, talk about even more detailed things that we do. Happy to do it.
Definitely. Good luck on the daily grind. We'll see you out there.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.